All right, so Andrew and Jennifer, come on up here, and I want you guys to meet them for a second because I'm just super excited about this opportunity. I'm excited about their heart, and we're actually going to do an interview with Andrew next weekend as well, just to kind of share this with others who come. And I just want you to give them a sense of who you are, and then also kind of maybe why you did this and what you're all excited about. So,
all righty, we'll do. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming. I'm Andrew Lyle, pastor here at Center Avenue Church of God. This is my wife, Jennifer. We live next door here. If there's ever any issues while you guys are here, you can stop over and harass us. Jeff Wenke, I'm sure you all are aware of good old Jeff there. He called me, it's probably been about a month or so, I suppose. It's been going quickly. While back and said, hey, what do you think about this? We have this launch team going on, church plant. And I said, that's a darn good idea. So Mitch and I got talking to one another, and right now, Center Avenue Church of God we're pretty small, an older population. I came in about a year and a half ago trying to restart that and stuff. And like you guys, we've had the highs and lows of COVID. And so we're dealing with that like everybody else, but we're really kingdom focused here. And so I thought this was a wonderful way to embrace that and put some rubber to the road, as they say in that regard. So we're just glad to have you guys, and we want to just come over for a minute and say hi and welcome you kind of officially. And sounds like you're going to hear more from me next week, so I won't say too much more, but I'll let Jennifer speak real quick too.
Just, I'm a teacher in Vicksburg, and I'm so happy to meet these guys because they have kids the same age as ours, so we're hoping to forge a little friendship there. Our kids don't have any kids at church, so it would be really nice to even have them come over and visit you guys too, and just kind of see. Our daughter loves children and would love to work with your children. So she's an 8th grader too, but we're excited to see more life over here, more young life, I should say, because we've been, the youngest people in our church for a long time now. So welcome, and please enjoy the space.
All right. Thank you, brother.
well, thank you. Thanks, guys. We really do appreciate it. It's fun having a fellow educator. There's a lot of educators in this group too, and some Vicksburg ones as well. So it's great just to have you guys be so welcoming and loving. And I shared this to Andrew. We didn't get the same warm reception from a lot of churches, so it really does mean a lot, warms my heart to see you guys so kingdom-minded in this. So
We're
thanks.
excited about it. Like I said, welcome to you guys. God bless you. We'll get out of your hair and enjoy your time together.
Thanks, guys. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, like I said, this is for Facebook or Zoom or whatever we're on right now, and so people will be able to comment in. You guys have heard it. There's kind of a rise in the COVID upticks right now. I know some people have been sidelined for that, particularly in our group as well, so prayers there. But if they comment, Cherie's on it, and she can kind of communicate it up to us and pass along what's going to happen here. So kind of for tonight, where I wanted to start was we haven't done this in a long time, and we haven't been together for a launch meeting in a while. So this is fun. This is our first one back since summer, I think it was, not on Zoom. And one thing we'd been doing was the stone piles, talking about how have you seen God moving, whether that's personally in your life or perhaps, in your huddle or something like that. So I want to just kind of open that up right now. And I've talked to some of you, so I know some cool things are going on. And again, this is for mutual encouragement here, just to hear that God is moving, because sometimes it can feel pretty bleak with everything. There's kind of a dark tone in life right now. And so to hear, God is still moving. God is still moving people towards him, even in this season. And so I'd love for anybody, if you have a story, you can share it. And you can kind of pop up here and do that. Or if you're not feeling that brave, you can just kind of stand up where you are, and we'll go from there. Chad's got some. I talked to him about it.
God's not doing anything in the church right now. How's it going? My name's Chad Bereither. So just to tell a little bit. There's no specific story, but what's going on in our huddle right now. So that's been a nice source of consistency through the COVID. Even early on, it was all Zoom, and now we're going every other week, like Zoom, meeting in person. Once snow starts flying, that's going to make it a little bit interesting. So we'll figure out what happens there. But we just also made a transition recently to studying some outside material. So we had talked to Mitch within our team, gaining a couple of things that were good options, things that we were wrestling with that came up during our discussions, and just really positive. So we're kind of leaning into communication, so marital communication as a parent, and really just how to communicate through love. And it's been great. I think we were kind of getting to that point where with talking about some of the discipleship shapes, it's like, so what did God say to you this week? And we were like, I don't know that I was thinking about it. So it kind of gives us a nice like catalyst and impetus to talk about what you talk about, how is God talking to you through that? And just some anecdotal feedback from the team is like the best conversations that we've had so far, right? Deepest conversations that we've had so far. Some serious growth going on. So it's awesome. So if you're not actively still meeting your huddles, just a word of encouragement. I think it's been the biggest spiritual growth for me through this very uncertain time. And if you want any more feedback on that, I know I'm putting something together for Mitch, just some guidance on what's working, what's not working for us, in case you decide to take that leap as well. So who had their hand up next?
So on Zoom meeting right now, we have Kim and Rachel Slager, and Rachel just mentioned that she really enjoyed being at Shane and Sally's house, and she met two people that she hadn't met before. I'm assuming that were part of the church plant. So she thought that was really cool, and yeah, what a neat way to serve together and also bring other people into it, and maybe opportunities that we haven't had to meet other people within this group. So thank you, Rachel, for sharing that.
Yes.
As she keeps typing. I haven't pre-read this one. And Kristen and her are having their third book club meeting with Christian-based books with her coworkers. She tried to type fast. Okay. So so it sounds like that's going really well. And cool to bring coworkers into that experience as well. So thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, and Rachel had, I know she and Kristen, I believe, had brought to that wine and paint thing too, which is cool to see that kind of translate into some of the hangouts as well. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so I think she's talking about Paul and Cliff, who she hadn't met. So a couple friends of Chad's invited to the preview services, and one part of that entity, that couple have been to the services, both the preview services, and we had dinner with Cliff and Shaylee last Friday, which was cool too. So it's cool to see them potentially taking some next steps with Converge as well, which is pretty awesome. You guys are all so shy. Teeth here. But I want to encourage you guys in your huddles or just in general, send out a quick message on Facebook. Oh, sorry. Send out a quick message on Facebook. Be encouraging each other about the cool things that are happening day to day. Because there are a lot of cool things. I think, like I said, I think it's really easy to kind of get drugged down in the mud in this season. But we're continually amazed at some of the cool things that are happening. We had a little get together this weekend. Kenzie's favorite thing to do, have a witches party. And people think it's strange, I think, that a pastor's wife hosts witch parties. But We had a few of our like coworkers over, and just I'd never met. Well, one of them I'd met the husband. It was but cool just to connect that way, and they're asking about the church, and they don't have any church involvement right now, as far as I know, and so it's cool to see even in the midst of this, even though our groups are getting, they're smaller, that we still have these opportunities for God to kind of weave in to people's paths through this. So. One of the things I want to mention too about this building, so kind of what this is this is an opportunity for us to be indoors for the next several months. We signed a contract for 6 months, and they've been very gracious. We didn't talk about money, and I've shared the story with some, and they're like, well, we've got this guy, Andrew, he's really detailed about things. He runs facility and finances here, and he's wondering if you guys are planning on paying anything. I said, well, we don't want to wear out our welcome. We want to earn our keep here. What are you thinking? He's like, well, is $50 a month okay? And it just like they really just want to cover electricity and some of those, those basic utilities. So it really is just a heart to host and to bring some life into this building. And so we're really grateful. Obviously, there's some space things that we have to consider. That's why we have to do the every other. And so it'll be, if we have a full group, it'll be full in here, and we'll have to think through that. But I know Chad and I have been talking a little bit. We didn't cross paths this week. We were phone tagging a little bit, but him piloting a house church. And part of that is to create an avenue where you can do church in your home with people that may not feel comfortable, either one going in public settings right now, or people who just in general wouldn't feel super comfortable going into a church building right now. And so one of the things that we want to do, and we hope to do in the midst of that, is create an environment where it's not just purely passive, where whoever hosts these house churches, Chad and Rachel, they become much more like pastors and less like hosts. And so we want to build our worship service in such a way too. So this upcoming Sunday, we'll kind of start with probably an opening song just to kind of get some energy going and that sort of thing. And we're going to have that interview, and that will be a bit more kind of receptive. But instead of going into worship music where you in your house just sit there and kind of listen or maybe sing awkwardly, we're actually going to tell you and anybody watching on home to take this time, we're going to do this at the end. Sorry, I'm losing my track. We're going to go through, do our message, and then at the end, while we're doing worship, we're going to kind of put it back and get Chad and Rachel to kind of do more facilitation around the message, have some conversation. And in a perfect world in the future, if these started to grow in these house churches, potentially even find some musicians in those groups. If they wanted to worship together, they could, and do that more personally. And then as we figure out some technology things, get maybe some two-way dynamic going too. So a house church, person from a house church prays into the service, those kinds of things. So we're kind of taking it small steps at a time, but that will also kind of deal with some of our space issues here. The other side of that too is if space really does become a problem, we can always just add a service. But this is kind of the next 3-4-ish months for sure. And one of the things we're wrestling with now, and I'd love for you guys to pray into this, is we're going into this, and we've been very transparent about this with Andrew. We're looking for our next spot. And so they're happy to host us, and I think are even willing to extend it if we want to. But one of the things that we're looking at is either we're finding that next place, that permanent location that we buy or lease or whatever, and just talking to some builders and stuff like that. It might be Easter at the soonest at that point with just time to get into building projects and that sort of thing. So if that were the case, if it was Easter, maybe you'd know that, and we could still launch in January, February, and we do that from here, and we're meeting weekly, and we kind of have a kind of, I don't know, it'd be launch 2.0 or whatever you want to call it from our real location in the future. But that's kind of the conversation, is how much is launch tied into location and how much of it is tied into the people we have, because we really want it to be where before we go weekly, we're not asking every one of you to volunteer every time. That would become taxing on the whole team. And so it also has a lot to do with the amount of people we have. And so all these things we're kind of holding in balance together and trying to figure that out. And so some of those possibilities are staying here if we see that target end location sooner than later in sight, spring or fall or something like that. Or even potentially looking for a great location that we could lease for a whole year and say, okay, we're going to go into this place and we're going to be there for at least a year while we're looking. Because one of the things that we also are considering is it feels ugly to prey on people's demise, but there are buildings downsizing, closing, or businesses, even probably churches. And I wouldn't want to jump too quickly and then something comes available in 6 months because of just the economy and everything else right now. So that's kind of where we're at with the building, but we know we're here for at least 3-4-ish months for sure, and we could be here longer if we need to. So one thing that I want to start doing in these launch team meetings is really what these launch team meetings are about, and we were never planning to have them this long. We were going to launch October 4th. Funny enough, it's not October 4th anymore. And so part of this is thinking through what is the goal of these launch team meetings. And for me, one of the big goals of these launch team meetings is just preparing us as leaders to lead the church. And one of the ways that I think is really exciting that we get to do is handing off some teaching opportunities. And so if you would like to teach here, I want you to come tell me because I want to get you lined up for that. But tonight, Kinsey is going to teach, and we've been trailing through this Israel kind of analogy or history. And one of the things that we're looking at is how does that story of Israel feel a lot like us as a church community right now, kind of wandering through, waiting, unsure when, but also how much as individuals can we resonate with what they were going through in those moments with all that unsure future in front of them. And so we're kind of tracking through some of that Israel story. And 3 weeks, Jake's going to be continuing that as well, 3 weeks after this one. But tonight, Kenzie's going to jump into the Red Sea, quite literally, and go from there.
Okay, well, I'm literally going to jump into the Red Sea with you guys tonight. So one thing that I've noticed lately, especially this past week, is every time that I talk to someone, it feels chaotic. Like every conversation I have, every situation that I get text by, every turn, it just feels a little chaotic. And the more I stopped and I thought about just why, this just feels like a pattern. It feels like it's not just me. It feels like it's just, in general, our culture right now. And it just, honestly, it took me back to the story of the Israelites. So I'm excited to kind of share what we saw them go through and the chaos that they went through and how maybe we can take a nugget from what they've learned and what they went through. And so I'm going to take you back and remind you of the story just in case you've forgotten or you haven't heard part of it. And so as we recall, in Exodus chapter 12, we saw the angel of death sweep over Egypt, which was really the most terrifying and the last plague. We saw so many sons and grandfathers and husbands, any firstborn, die. And so what we learn in Exodus 12 is Pharaoh and all of his officials, they tell us in verse 30, woke up during the night and heard this loud wailing that was all throughout the land, and there wasn't a single house in where someone had not died. Then later in 33, we hear the reaction. And what happens is they send Moses and Aaron a statement that says, get out of here as quickly as possible, because they thought they would all die if they didn't release the Israelites at this point. And so here's where the plot twist comes. And after 430 years of them living in this land and being oppressed and being slaves to the Egyptians, we see them just being let go. I mean, can you imagine, we haven't experienced that where for generations upon generations, we're slaves. And to just see someone say, okay, we can leave. We can just walk out of here. They had over 600,000 fighting men, so that's just the men that were able to fight, plus the women and the children and the men and young boys that weren't able to. So we can imagine about 1 million people maybe walking out of this land that they've been captive in. And I'm not sure, but I know how communication works in our world today, and I would say that those 1 million people did not get the message the same way maybe Aaron and Moses and the few people around them did. So when they didn't go straight out of the city on the main road, and instead they're like, hey, come this way, come into the wilderness. I'm sure there was some people that were kind of like, what are we doing? Why are we going this way? Like, that's the shorter path. We know that way. Let's go. So they're wandering through the wilderness and kind of wondering, why are we going this way? And starting to feel that chaos. But the thing for them is that they had that pillar of smoke and the pillar of fire that was God leading in front of them. So they could visibly see that. So it probably gave them a little bit of, okay, even though I don't know where we're going, and even though this doesn't feel right, I can do it. And so as they go through the wilderness, they get to the Red Sea. Now, the Red Sea at that point was, it was an impassable sea. So they're standing there in front of a sea, knowing that they're supposed to be going to this land and that this is their destiny, but it doesn't make sense why God's brought them there. Now, what I love is a lot of commentaries that I've read and just a lot of authors that I've listened to, they talk about how there's certain images in the Bible that play a special role in telling God's story. And seas are one of those. That a sea, commentators will tell you that it's an ancient symbol for chaos. That it's something that kind of opposes the good order to God's creation. And we see this a few different times in the Bible. We see a pattern. So in Genesis, way in the beginning, we see that there was chaos in the deep waters. And what does God do? He speaks into it, and all of a sudden, land is exposed. So it's calming that chaos. Then later in Genesis, we see with Noah, what happens? The great flood comes, seas come, chaos, and then God brings the land. So there's this pattern of chaos threatening to kind of take over and unmake God's creation, and then God intervening. So, and he displays who he is to the world by what he does in calming that chaos. So back to Egypt. In Egypt, we see Pharaoh first kind of grief-stricken with everybody else. They've lost all these people. And after the initial shock, I can only imagine the pure rage that would come out of him. Like, what has happened? We have lost so many people, friends, loved ones, because these people and their God said that they should die. So what are we going to do? Let our economy go? Just walk right out? So now have I only lost all these people, and now I'm losing the people that do all the work for us, that make us this rich country. No, let's go get them. So you have a rage-filled, not only Pharaoh, but all the people, every household had someone die. All these people gather up the men that are left and send out all the chariots they have. They talk about having 600 good chariots, and then the rest of the chariots from around Egypt. Okay, switching back, we're with the Israelites in front of the Red Sea. God tells him, okay, you're going to camp here facing the Red Sea. So face that, thing that's you can't go across. Can you imagine if you're holding your kid's hand and you have your mom who's elderly next to you, or your dad, and you're like, how are we going to get across this? Not only that, but guess what? Murmurs start coming up from the back, and they start saying, hey, we think we see dust from chariots. We hear the chariots. They're coming to kill us. Because our God just murdered, a quarter of Egypt. Why would they come and just take us back? Like, they're coming to kill us. I think if any of us were standing there, we'd feel the chaos, and we'd feel the anxiety, and we'd feel like we're out of control. And so what do? They cry out and they say to Moses, "Why did you bring us here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done to us?" In 12, they go on and they say, "Didn't we tell you this would happen while we were in Egypt? You should have left us alone, led us to be slaves to the Egyptians. It's better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness." I think sometimes we may say things like that. Maybe not in those words, but why did you do this to me? Why didn't you just leave me happy, leave me right where I was? And then God speaks through Moses. "Don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch. The Lord will rescue you today. The Egyptians you can see now will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm." So God set up this whole situation. He took them on a weird roundabout way through the wilderness to the Red Sea that he knew they could not pass. And he hardened Pharaoh's heart. We know that it says it multiple times. He drove Pharaoh to do this. He hardened his heart. He hardened the army's hearts. And then he tells Moses the rest of the plan. Well, before that, he tells the people, "Hey, get a grip and stay calm. Be still." And then he tells Moses the plan. He says, "Moses, you need to go hold up your staff, and I'm going to protect you." So he sends the cloud that's been in front of them the whole time. He sends it to the back, and he has Moses stand in the front, and Moses lifts his staff, and they go through. So, a sea that was unpredictable and untamable and was thought to even resist who God was and his power. All of a sudden, God demonstrates his power over that chaos. And in a single breath, he creates a highway for the people. And not only that, he exposes his power by killing the rest that come through. So let's go back. We're all facing chaos right now. And even if it's not us, we're hearing chaos around us. Chaos after weird situation, after chaotic situation. So, what are we currently facing that God's saying, "You know what? I'm going to fight for you, but you have to remain still. You have to remain calm. You have to watch. And then you've got to move." Is it the stress of work? Is it not being able to plan ahead? Is it having the rules changed on us constantly? Like, what chaos are we faced that we're just like, gosh, like, I mean, how many times have we said it? I don't know what the right answer is. Maybe it's because we're not supposed to have the answer, but we are supposed to stand there and we're supposed to believe that God will intervene, that God will demonstrate his power, because so many times he's allowed chaos and he's brought chaos. And then why? Just to show his power, to say, "Hey, I am God. The chaos is calmed and you can go." So I think as we're in that chaos this week, especially, like as we're in those moments of just being like, what the heck is going on? I want you to remember the chariots coming and them standing there and thinking, okay, so we're either going to walk in and drown or they're going to come and we're going to die. We don't usually experience that type of terror. But what we feel in those moments, and we think that it's out of control and what the heck is God doing? It might be because he's ready to demonstrate something really powerful. So the good news, that he's setting this up to display his power, to display who he is, not only to people that don't know him, but to people like us that do and forget who he is and what he does. So we're going to take just a few minutes by ourselves to be able to stop and be still and kind of evaluate our hearts and where we're at and what Red Sea is before us? What chaotic event is before us that we're maybe not reacting like Moses, but we're reacting like every other Israelite? And we're saying, what are you doing? So what Red Sea is in front of you? What multiple Red Seas are in front of you? And how is it that you can be still and ask God to come intervene, or at least help you stay calm while you wait for his plan, and then give you wisdom to move? So I'm going to go ahead and I'll open us in prayer. You'll have a few minutes to pray, maybe write on your phone what it is you're thinking about it, jot it down, but just so you remember what Red Sea is in front of you, and then what do you need to do with God about that? How can you calm yourself and listen for wisdom? And then Mitch is going to close us. So pray with me. God, I think we come to you today facing a Red Sea, whether it's big or small, but there's parts in every single one of our lives that don't make sense right now, and that we don't see your plan. We don't see how we'll get through this, or maybe what the next best step is. But what we do know, and what we've seen, and what you've reminded us in Scripture, is that you are in control, and that you want to show your people who you are and draw people to you. And we are lucky to be part of that story. And I ask that in our every situation that we're in this week, and as we reflect on what our next steps are, that we are constantly reminded of who you are and how much you love us, and how sometimes our own point of view or how we feel about a situation is nothing like what you are doing or how you feel about it or what your plan is. And we ask that you would give us wisdom, and that you would give us the eyes to see it, and that you would give us even the lips to express what you've done so others know about you. Thank you for who you are and what you do for us. We just ask you to be with us for this next little bit.
All right, guys. I'm curious because I was thinking in that, and Kenzie and I were even just talking a little bit before we came. Like, it's just really hard to know what to do next. You know, like I spent a lot of time racking my brain, praying, like, okay, God, what now? Because it does, like you said, it seems like the rules are getting rewritten every day, and it's hard to know what to do to support this community, but also what to do to support those outside of our community, those far from Jesus that need just some hope right now, some encouragement. And so I don't really have any good answers. So I come out of this feeling a little bit like the scared Israelites looking back and just saying, man, that dust cloud doesn't look good, and maybe we should just go back to the way we were doing things. You know, it sucked. It wasn't as good as what we think it was going to be, but it's probably better than death. So I struggle with that, and I find myself a little bit in the position of Moses, just saying, man, I've got people that don't want to go forward and don't want to go backwards. What do I do, God? And that's hard. And I'm not asking for pity or anything like that. I just want you to know, like, that's where I resonate in this story a little bit. And just, I found myself saying, hey, God, like, give me that word like you did, hold up the staff and go, or something. And I feel like he does in small ways, and maybe that's what it is right now, one step at a time across the floor of the Red Sea. But that's kind of what I was feeling and hearing out of that, and just kind of that reminder to trust in God and trust that he wants to be known through his acts, not mine, but his acts. And so I'm just curious. I want to put that out there, maybe for a couple of you, if you want to come up and can maybe share some reflections, whether it's personally or maybe a word for the church as well. So if you want, you could come up and share, or I can bring the mic to you.
control, then why? I truly believe that by Easter, the whole situation would have been over. We'd be on the downside, or it would be behind us, and it came and went. Summer's come and gone. That's all you hear. Of course, where you live, you can't get away from it. You go to work, after where I work, yeah, we have to be careful, have to deal with it. You go to a store, you got to deal with, everywhere you go, we're dealing with, it's front and center, this situation. And you just wonder, okay, God, what do you got in store for us? You just think, well, maybe there'll be an answer tomorrow. And there's not an answer tomorrow. There's, it's just ongoing. It doesn't seem like it's ever going to end. And so it's, I don't know. And I've had situations in my life where you look back and say, oh, okay, now I see, God, why that happened. But it just has been a challenge. I'm trying to understand what God's reason is for all of this.
That's good. Thanks, Carl. Yeah, that's just a good, honest, raw feeling. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Thanks. I guess I'm just continually reminded about how many people around us need God in such a bad way, and even people who are Christians, and just the grace towards one another through this super challenging, divisive situation. And I don't know, I was having a conversation with Natalie, with our daughter, yesterday around friends who I know have lost friends because of their attitudes towards this whole thing. And she's like, Mom, are you going to be friends with that person anymore? I'm like, of course, like they need grace and love, like now more than ever. And just, I think that like what we all were called to like expand the Church of Christ and to like be a witness to God and his love and his compassion and his mercy through all this is just so important now as much as it was in February when we were on a solid path forward, right? And that path is going to look different, and it's going to take on continually shape shifting as the coming months come, but that's okay. And I think just like continuing to follow, like, where is God using us on a personal level with people in our lives, with our own family members. I just think about like, what do my kids need right now? And then what do those people close to me who are hurting in so many different ways, and how to make this less divisive, but more graceful for everyone, both believers and non-believers right now. And you do need to talk into the mic because Rachel can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's good. I appreciate that. And I think that's like the struggle for me in this is like, God, you want us to go connect with people. You want us to meet people. You want us to share your good news. And everything seems so preventative to doing that right now. Even to have a church service, it just is met with a lot of barriers, and so I love that. I love that word, and yeah, there are lots of opportunities out there. They just may look a lot different than we ever thought they would.
I was just thinking that the Lord's trying to tell us that, everything in his timing. And when you look at all the stories in the Bible, how much time they took, years, and how much time took before Jesus actually came and, showed up and died on the cross, and everything that, humanity had to go through in that period of time before Christ came, just I call them weird situations, just the weird things they had to do. And I just think we, in America especially, expect things to be done right now. We started this church. Come on, let's get going. We have a timeline. Exactly. We should be started and finished by this time. And Lord's like, no. So we're going to slow it down, and we're going to start making relationships just small little individual, which is super hard for me. I am not really an extrovert person. That I'm holding this microphone is very shocking to me, but I just have been encouraged by the Lord, start stepping out of your comfort zone and start talking to one person, and then maybe it'll be two, and just do that. And Jesus, if you read his ministry, it was the woman at the well. It was not always big crowds. So I just knew we just need to take a step back and go slow. And I think this is cute. This is just it's shelter out of the weather. It's a shelter out of the storm. So we can meet together, and just whoever comes, and we're just going to have a good group. And then each one of us, if we continue to just think about relationships wherever we are, that's all. I think that's all Jesus wants. It just needs to be personal.
Yeah, thanks for that. That was really good. And that is definitely my my vice there, is I want it now. And it is especially hard. And you guys all know it, and whatever your respective kind of niches are and careers and paths, like whatever the expectation is of how things take in that path, that's what you think it should be. And right now, I've studied a lot of church planning, and it's like 9 months to a year, and this thing should be rocking and rolling, and it's hard for me to swallow right now. So that's a good word, just to slow down and trust God in this and be still, like Kenzie was saying. So that's a good word on looking ahead. So, we've talked about this rotation a little bit. I'm going to keep saying it just so you guys remember and don't forget, and be able to explain it to your friends and whatnot, because this rotation is a great thing in some ways, and sometimes it feels like a hamstring in some ways. So this rotation of preview service, engage weekend, launch team meeting, in some ways, I just absolutely love it, because it gives us the space to actually do ministry. I'm telling you, ask Carter. Carter probably wears most of it. There's a lot of preparation for one service, especially when we were doing setups and that sort of thing. You go to that every week. That becomes all you think about. It's harder to do that engagement and some of that, even just future planning, building a church kind of stuff. We're still sitting, Kim, if she's still on, can hear me, still sitting on the bridge bylaws, because I have to find time to go through them and amend them for our own bylaws so we can get our tax ID number. It's just silly stuff like this. Not silly, but stuff like that just takes time, So this cycle really does give us the opportunity to do that. I love that Engage weekend. Last weekend was awesome. Not just the organized deal at Shane and Sally's, but I actually dropped by a couple of the Engage hangouts and stuff too. It was just cool seeing that stuff going on. And I love that we're actually taking a weekend out to just be the church. And obviously, hopefully you're still engaging in personal worship and doing those things on your own as well, but where we put our energy there. And then the launch team meetings for this kind of connecting. It's really reflective, that up, in, and out, right? This is the in, where we kind of build into each other, encourage each other. The out is Engage week, and the up is our worship weekend. So there's so much good about that, but I think sometimes it hamstrings us, because it would be a lot easier to get your friends connected if it just was more consistent, right? That's true. And I know that's, especially in a season of change and interruption, people are dying to have consistency. So, it's kind of this love-hate thing right now, but right now that is our consistency, and we're just going to roll that at least for a couple more months. And we'll figure out how to do this better and better, and keep going. But one of those things that I want to talk about was that Engage weekend and those options or those opportunities to hang out with people. One of the things that I was hoping, encouraging, and it was just a great kind of springboard off that, Brenda, was just to keep encouraging you guys. I know I've heard some of the stories many of you are doing, but keep pushing, keep encouraging you guys to do those hangouts. And originally, when we had these vision meetings back in January, it's 30 people, right? That just isn't going to happen anymore. For some of you introverts, it was never going to happen, right? But to realize what our constraints are right now, and to think hangouts much more in a small, attainable way. Maybe that's 2-3 people that you're just consistently spending time with. Maybe it looks more like, hey, I've got these two coworkers I spend a lot of time with anyways. I'm going to start doing a weekly lunch with them, just hang out with them, get to know them, something like that. But just start continuing to figure out that really practical way that you can be investing pretty regularly, every week or two, into some people around you. Because I do think those are going to be those connectors. Those are going to be the people that eventually you are going to lead to Jesus, and then bring them back here. Or those people that maybe have walked away from Jesus and are going to find their way back to this church building through you, or a church building, whatever one it is, at whatever time. So I want to keep encouraging in that, and knowing that those circles have shrunk a little bit, but we also have a lot of opportunities right around us. So with that said, looking ahead, next week we have this preview service right here. So there's lots of things that have to happen between now and then. We're going to kind of, as respectfully as possible, spruce up the place, right? And so Andrew's given us a lot of leniency here on that, letting us move any of the furniture they want and do whatever. And so one of the things, we're going to put like a black backdrop around there. I know that's a pretty pink wall, but the camera's not going to love that pink wall, and my skin won't either. So we're gonna do some things like that, and the kids area back there we'll get things going there. But with that said, it's not quite the same setup as Texas Corners, but we still are going to need some people involved. And I know for sure it'll probably minimize how many people we need in each of these roles. For the most part, like greeters, we're probably not going to need 6 or 8 anymore, because we're not covering it. We're maybe 3 or 4, something, 1 or 2 kind of at the doors and parking, and 1 at a welcome table in here. So if you want to keep doing that, let me know. Or if you want to try something new, that's okay too. It'd be really good if everybody in here got good at kind of learned how to do a few different things. One thing we do need is kids ministry. So we need probably 4 to 5 in there. And it's really well laid out. It's a video, the whole deal. It's not a ton of, you're not going to have to be an actor or something like that, or be a perfect teacher or anything like that. You just need to love kids and be available. So if you'd like to do that, contact me or Kenzie. We need 4 or 5 for this next week. And when I say next week, our goal is we get a team of, if we need 4 or 5 kids each week, at least for the near future, we have 10 people on a roster. So every other service, that's every 6 weeks, you do that sort of thing. We'll need setup and teardown. Setup and teardown is going to be really a lot easier. A lot of that's going to be covered by the band, Carter and I, and Kyle Penning, who helps with the music as well. But it's just it's not going to be much. It's going to be like moving some things. So a lot of it is going to be that cleanup. So we're going to do some basic cleaning procedures in here, where we'll wipe down kind of the handsy areas of the place before and after, and as well as back in the kids area. And then they actually have a cleaner that'll come through on Friday, but at least that'll kind of take care of our space. We'll do it before, obviously, because they have a service Sunday morning, and then do it after, just out of respect for that. So we'll need people to do that, and then that's kind of it coming up. But if there's other more creative things, one of the things we want to continue to do is create a space for after. And so we're going to go to Presidential and do dinner and euchre over there. If you want to get into more of that creative event planning side of thinking what's the thing after, because what I love about that is it gives us an opportunity to socialize together, gives us an opportunity if our friends come to get to know some other people, but even better yet, in my opinion, it gives you an opportunity to invite your friends to that who may never come to this. And so that's kind of that built-in hangout time. So there's these other opportunities in there, but be thinking about those, and if there's 1 or 2, you say, hey, I'd do it, let me know, and then we're going to get actually a list, a sign up, and we're going to try to get out through December, through the end of the year, to get people signed up ahead of time. So that's that. Like I said, euchre and dinner next week at Presidential. We'll kind of do it just like the trivia night, where we're kind of spaced out and that sort of thing, and you just play cards with we're saying euchre, but if you hate euchre, you can play other games too, or you can just socialize and eat dinner with them. That works too. So we're going to do that next week afterwards. But I wanted to put your heads up, I've already approached Andrew about, they didn't do a Christmas Eve service here last year, so it might be just us, or it might just be us planning them and we invite them to join us. But we are planning on doing a Christmas Eve service, which will be really cool, really fun. And then for the launch team meeting, the weekend before our Christmas Eve, so it's like the 20th. I know that's a really hectic time, and so we have to look at specific dates. It may not be Sunday night, but I was actually going to ask Jake and Kaylee if we could just use their space on like a Wednesday when they're not usually open, and have like a team Christmas party or something in there, and do something fun like I don't know, karaoke or something like that. We'll see, but just put that. What? Huh? It's very fun. I love karaoke. But anyways, just put that on your radar that we'll look at doing something like that as best we can, as carefully as we can, respecting just people's caution and all of that too. So no, those are coming up. But where are we at here? All right, right on time. So with that said, I want to see if there's any other kind of questions or clarifications or anything or comments that you guys or anybody want to ask or make. We're kind of wrapping things up here before we go for next week. All right. Well, that's easy.
I use my random number generator.
Yeah.
And number 3 and number 10 get to pick out a prize box.
Who's number 3 and 10? How do we figure that out?
1, 2, 3. So Chad.
Ooh.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10. John Ryan.
All right.
You want me to do one more number? I will.
Yeah, do one more. So there's, you guys have t-shirts, but if you want another t-shirts, there's sweatshirts. If we don't have your right size, we can get them. That's another thing is I do want to get a bit of a swag store going here. We probably won't pre-make a bunch of stuff, but if you're like, I really want a hat or start, maybe I'll put out a form or something so you guys can give me your feedback, and then we can kind of order it as you need it, and then that way we don't have a bunch of things we don't use or they sit in a box like this forever. So,
So it was number 3 and number 5.
and 10
Or not, sorry, 13 and 5.
and 3.
Well, I already said that.
Oh, 3, 10, 13, and 5.
3, 4, 5. So Carl, and then you were number 13 because I counted already.
All right. Well, I'm going to pray, and then you guys can come up and get your prizes. And then, yeah, I'll stick around if you want to chat too. So on your way out, obviously mask up and have a great night. So, God, thank you for this time together. Thank you for everybody who's here. We pray for those who couldn't make it tonight, especially if they're struggling with illness right now. God, we just thank you for this team and their commitment and their, first and foremost, commitment and faith in you. And on a more personal, I just thank you, God, for their commitment to this team and this church. They never knew they were signing on for this in January. And so I'm so grateful for their perseverance with this and their love for this community that they continue to go. So, God, thank you for them. I ask that you bless them in this week. Continue to grow them through the huddles and just through their personal worship. God, and I just pray blessings on them and their families and health going into this week and beyond. Lord, we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.